other thing about frequency is just to mention is I often use an example of I was doing a healing with somebody in person and just a regular middle-aged woman going through life. She's a healer also, and I work with a lot of healers, and I was just giving her a tune-up, and she was having a pretty good day, and I got to a patch of energy out in her aura, and I said, "Oh, there's a ball of anger energy out here." And she said, "Oh, it's the weirdest thing. Everywhere I went today, people just erupted in anger, and I'm having a good day." And I went, "Yeah, well, this is a ball of red that came from a male." And I described the person, what they look like, and what was going on. She went, "Oh yeah, yeah, I know exactly what that was." And so she still had that vibration of anger sitting in her aura, and other people glommed onto it that maybe had a match. "Oh yeah, I had an angry day today too. Boing! I'm going to express it with you." And so she was going through her life just shopping, buying stuff at the hardware store, and somebody just erupts with their anger. It's frequency. They energetically saw that anger. They had their own unfinished anger business. Had nothing to do with the two of them. It was the frequency of the anger itself. So that's a point I wanted to make too, is that there can be anger energy. We're just talking about, I'm not anger. I'm me, but I can experience anger. It's an energy, it's a frequency vibration, right? I'm not anger, but I can experience it. Worry, I'm not worry, but I can experience it as a vibration. Then I can also um, finish it. But what we're talking about more here today is when we accidentally pick up other people's worry, anger, whatever. For anybody that's sensitive, empathic, that's ever been to a funeral, ooh, those are the worst energetically. If you're picking up all that grief, that's a hard one, right? Anybody, any sensitives out there been to a funeral? I'll tell you, kids have a really hard time with this. If you have sensitive kids, and part of the reason for that is it's more of a complex energy that they haven't really experienced yet. It's too complex. It's like statistics or calculus or something. It's like, I don't know what to do with that, so I'm just gonna, you know. So they might just have an emotional eruption, breakdown, or something. It's an energy overload of the frequency of grief. And at a funeral, if you're watching the energy, well, first of all, the soul that just died is up there going, "Hey guys, thanks for coming. Good to see you. It's all good over here." But the people going are, especially in our American culture, is sorry for your loss, and all that, is our protocol. What happens if you watch it energetically is, have you ever seen where they have the loved ones up front and people will come up one at a time? If you watch the energy that each person comes up and they put their own grief on that person unknowingly. But okay, one person's grief, five people's grief, 20 people's grief. So if you have a little child that's up front and experiencing that and doesn't know how to ground and be in their own space, and maybe they're a sensitive, an empath, or so forth, at the end of the day, they've got 50 adult grief energies sitting in their space. That's a meltdown on its way right there, because it's an energy overload. It's complex. They don't know what to do with it. So that happens. I've been there, done that. I'm like, Grandma was old. I know it's fine to go. I'm not that sad. I'm not that sad. But yeah, I experienced all of everybody else's grief, that I was part of the family, and all this other grief came up. I didn't know until years later. I tell a story on one more story, and we'll get into solution side here in a minute, in terms of kids too, because when they feel energies, especially that they're matching of the adults around them, it's really complex, and they don't have a reference point or know what to do with it. They might want to just go out and run a whole lot. They might want to just sit down and cry or be really angry. This is just a reaction to the energy overload in their space. When I was at a family gathering, a 9-year-old came in to for the holidays. All the adults are upstairs doing their hang, and all the kids are downstairs doing their thing. Everybody's cousins happy to see each other and everything. And a particular aunt came in, and the 9-year-old boy came up, just hi to the aunt. It was a real quick interaction. Gave her a hug. Good to see you. Went on with his day. Well, the aunt was going through grief. Her husband had died, and she was in her normal, natural grief space. But additionally, because her husband died and all the kids were gone and the grandkids were not in the area, she was additionally experiencing a lot of loneliness. So two frequencies in there on top of each other, two complex frequencies on top of each other, loneliness and grief and sadness. And what's going to happen to me? And so a lot of complex things that she was experiencing, totally where you would expect her to be, totally right on track. But when the 9-year-old empath hugged her, he matched that frequency vibration. And then he went on with his day, took that vibration. Now it's in his space, and it's just vibrating like a string there, right? A little bit later in the day, probably about an hour later or something, doing a sports event, just complete emotional breakdown. And the only experience he had of grief in his life up until that point was when a horse died. His horse died, and that was very sad for him. That's the only grief he knew so far. So that was 2 years ago. But all of a sudden, in the middle of playing sports with his friends and cousins at the holidays, it's a great time. All of a sudden, he's having an emotional breakdown about his horse that died 2 years ago. What's going on there? He matched her grief, and it was just real quick. Said hello, Matt gave her a hug. Good to see you. And you know what's funny later is the 9-year-old told me, "Gosh, I would have sworn two people came in the door." I said, "Well, yeah, her husband that's deceased was very much right there with her. He came in before she did into the room." He's that kind of tuned in kid. Now he's just going on with life and dating and doing his thing. But at that time, so he's having a meltdown. So what do you do? So I had him sit down and just create like a grounding cord underneath him. And for a youngster, maybe a visualization of like you're sitting on a tree trunk. Like you go in the woods and you sit on a beach. This is a visualization. You don't have to go out in the woods. Imagine you're sitting on a big tree trunk that goes from your tailbone all the way, all the way, all the way to the very center of the earth, not just down 10 feet or down part way, but all the way to the core. That's a recycling center all the way down there. And then just release everybody else's energy down that space. And if there's somebody else's sadness, and we didn't track it right away, but I knew he had an overload on a clairsentient level of feeling somebody else's energy, but I didn't quite track it yet. It's just, okay, let's ground. And I'm helping him, just sort out the energy. Within 10 minutes, he was back to playing sports and kind of forgot about why he was sad.